Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Leela Rhodes and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you so much for joining us here at NetCom Learning, a market leader in promoting lifelong learning, training, and talent development solutions. We are very excited to host today's webinar, Visual Analytics, Best Practices, Sharing, and Collaboration. And presenting today's topic is Deepak Lakotia, and Deepak is an MCT, MCSE, and Power BI specialist. He has provided Power BI solutions and proof of concept on BI capabilities, working with various clients on site and off-site. And Deepak is not only a SME in the Power BI area, but also employs all modern social and content sharing methods of staying current so that he can truly help his clients realize ROI on their training investments. He is a pleasure to work with and helpful beyond expectations. He's skillful, down to earth, and he has a great understanding of the client's needs and masters knowledge at his fingertips and so much more. So we're very excited to have him. Now, please bear in mind that this is still just an overview of a very robust topic. We do offer a collection of technical and business courses that can be tailored toward your specific requirements. If you're interested in a further discussion about any of those, you can make an appointment with our learning consultants through our website at www.netcomlearning.com. NetCom Learning helps customers build innovative learning organizations by achieving a smarter workforce, adapting to change, and driving growth. And we do this with a broad catalog of offerings, developing customized learning plans, and our global delivery capabilities. Since 1998, we have been empowering organizations with our managed learning services to help them reach optimal performance results and address challenges. NetCom Learning offers a comprehensive training portfolio for data and AI courses, and our upcoming classes include various trainings on Tableau Visual Analytics, Tableau Desktop 2, Intermediate, and much more. Private training to teams is also available, and those learning plans can also be customized to the specific needs of each audience. You can also access a variety of data and AI marketing assets, such as the free 1-hour training, free on-demand training, and blogs by clicking on the available webinar handouts. These offerings can also be found with a simple search on our website at www.netcomlearning.com. In this webinar, we will learn how to share and collaborate using Tableau and how to design compelling high-performance dashboards and much more. And now I'm going to go ahead and pass the time over to Deepak to present our topic. You should be able to share your screen. Hello, welcome.
Hello, everyone. A warm welcome again to each one of you on behalf of NetCom Learning. And we're going to spend the next 15 odd minutes talking about visual analytics. What are the best practices of it? How do you share and collaborate using Tableau? Before we get started, let's go ahead and go through the agenda a little bit just to know what we have in store for us today. We'll start off with having a brief introduction of what is visual analytics all about. Then we'll go about discussing what are the best practices. How do you go about knowing your user for whom you're designing these dashboards? Then how do you go about choosing the right color, choosing the right visualizations, creating dashboards, and finally we're going to end it off with a little Q&A session based on all the questions that we receive on the chat box here. All right, data. Data has never been more important. Now, as we are entering into this data era altogether, it's really important that we harness all the information that's made available to us. It's great that you have all the data that you really have in store and available for you, but it's equally important where you could go ahead and derive some analytics on top of it. And that is visual analytics. Visual analytics is the art of really transforming your data. It's about how you go about creating a map out of something, creating a graph, making anything on top of the data. Going through those long spreadsheets, it's tedious and at the same time very cumbersome, and it really does not help you a lot to really kind of identify what the data really wants to share as part of that story. And that's where visual analytics come into place. It's about how you exploit your visual perception and in order to identify really what's there behind the data. And that is what something humans like us, it becomes very easier for us to really kind of interpret the data and pull those important insights out of that data. Next of all, now that we know what is really visual analytics, let's understand why do we need visual analytics, right? Visual analytics is a very key component here. It allows us with the ability to really absorb all the information that's made available to us, improve the insights, and allows us to take those better, fast, and informed business decisions, which would allow us eventually to grow the business. You could stay back there and wait for the data to really grow up and then go ahead and derive those insights. And before you could really act upon that, it could be very late. And that's where visual analytics really comes in really very handy. Now, understanding the next advantage of really going into visual analytics is how it would basically go about helping you to improve your organization. As an organization, by going through those insights, you will have the understanding, a clear understanding of basically what should be the next steps that you really need to take in order to improve your overall business. It allows you to basically maintain your audience interest. Creating those spreadsheets with rows and rows of data is something that you would not want to pass on back to your users, right? And that's where visual analytics would not only keep your audience intact and keep their interest intact, basically, but also give them the information that they can really understand and use those to basically take any actions that they have to. Apart from that, visual analytics also supports us basically easily distribute that information into areas of opportunities which could go about generating insights and keep everyone involved in the whole process. That is why visual analytics is really important. Now, there are multiple ways in which you can and plethora of tools that are available right now in the market, right? From which you can use to generate the analytics by creating multiple visuals, reports, dashboards, and so on. What really keeps Tableau kind of separate from the rest of the tools is basically it's an enterprise grade solution, which helps you basically with visual analytics. We can go about talking almost for a week about why Tableau, why should you really go for Tableau, but we're not really going to spend a lot of time on that subject. We will keep ourselves strict to the agenda and talk about the next things that we have on place here. All right, moving on. Now let's talk about some of the best practices that involves visual analytics. Again, these best practices are specific to Tableau, but at the same time are very generic in nature as well. The first point is basically you should know your users. You need to know who your end users are, who are your consumers, who you are building these dashboards and reports for. Now it's really important that you understand what the user is really looking for. Once you understand what the user is looking for, you could go ahead and kind of streamline the process of your dashboard creation to make sure that the user can get to the insight faster. There are a few things that you really need to keep in mind when you go about designing these reports and these dashboards. First of all, you need to understand few tips and tricks around when you go about creating your actual visuals. First of, let's say for example, if you want to show something over time analysis to your end user, you want to make sure that your time is something available on the x-axis. If you're trying to compare some values, you may want to go ahead and use bar charts for those purposes. It's very crucial, becomes very crucial that you really understand what your end users are really looking for and how you supply that information back to your end users. Choosing the right visualizations is really important in those situations. If you would want to show about how the spread of the data is, you may want to go with a scatter chart. If you want to show how each one of the different categories contribute towards it, you may want to show a tree map and so on. Next, orientation. Orientation is also really important. It's about how you really present your data in a format that presents the data in the best format possible. If you want to go about creating, let's say, a basically a column chart that really takes up a lot of real estate that's available on the screen and becomes really difficult for the user to traverse through and get to the information that they're really looking for. And again, those are things that the users you would not want the users to really be challenged with and go through those experiences. That's where orientation really comes in, becomes a very critical part of it, where probably just by presenting the data vertically would kind of solve that issue and give them more real estate to work with and basically see some information that really makes sense to them. Next is choosing the right colors. Again, this sounds very simplistic in the nature and very something that's very obvious, but it's something that most of the people out there really miss out on. You really need to choose the right colors. First of all, themes. If you're designing your reports for any organization, your organization or any of your clients, you really need to make sure that you abide by the theme of the organization. It's about how most of the information of that organization is out there. For example, for example, you may design the reports based on the logo that the company has just to make sure that it stays consistent across. Themes are really essential and as also a part of basically branding a specific dashboard or report that you've built eventually for your end users. Next, consistent background. Consistency is the key to keep your users interested. And that's where background also something pretty simple, but something really comes out very important for the end users. If you go about keeping different backgrounds, it may take off the users away from and take off their experience all from the charts basically. And that is where you need to be very cautious about the background that you choose and how you keep them consistent across all the reports and dashboards that you build. Next, do not include too many colors. There are a lot of studies out there which really tells us that, okay, a human would not be able to kind of identify or differentiate it among more than 8 colors. That's the extent to which we could actually go about and perceive that information back from. And that's where you want to make sure that you do not include too many colors and eventually end up providing no insights to the end users. In these situations, when you really have to use more than 8 colors, let's say, for example, it's very essential that you kind of group the data together just so that it makes more sense and it's easy for users to eventually visualize. You can obviously allow the users to drill through further, get into more details, but from the outset, you want to make sure that you limit the number of colors that are exposed to the users so that they can really use that information to their benefit. Next, you want to keep the legend colors consistent. What do we mean by that is basically how you go about keeping the consistency of colors across reports. For example, if you're comparing information about different countries, and if USA is colored green on one of the pages that's there as part of your worksheets, as part of your Tableau report, you want to make sure that it stays consistent across all the different dashboards, all the different worksheets of that report, and so on. Just so that when you're telling the story, the user does not really get lost in trying to identify what those colors really meant. Keeping them consistent keeps the experience for the end users also very consistent. Next, color intensity and divergence. It's really important that you basically use these features. Color intensity really comes into the picture where you want to make sure that something that really needs to take the audience's attention, you kind of go ahead and you choose the right colors, choose the right temperature of those colors, and so on. Divergence also plays a very important part about how you go about explaining the breadth of the information that you have, and how do you go about explaining in form of, let's say, a heat map, letting the users know what is really happening. For example, if you're working with website analytics, you want to go ahead and show the information to the marketing team about when is the most interaction with the audience, with your customers really happening. And that's by using a heat map, by the marketing really jumping on your dashboard. And from the outset, they can go about and see that, okay, probably around 1 p.m. on every Tuesday is when we have our users hitting our websites most of the times, or anything that you may have in those situations. Next, maps. Maps are really important part of how you go about representing any information that exists either in a geographical location or otherwise. Now, using your maps to basically show how your measure is spread out, how different locations are really contributing to that measure really comes in handy. Maps are a very good way of visualizing and presenting information that is spread across multiple locations. But be very cautious on that. Do not use the maps just because you can, because there are situations where you do not want to use the maps and they don't really help serve the purpose. In case if you want to show multiple measures, again, those are things that you would really not want to use maps on. At the same time, if maps are available, but maybe let's say just a bar chart because you're just probably presenting 3 to 4 countries and you want to show that information out there, maybe that is something that would let the users kind of perceive that information in a better way. So make sure that you understand how these maps are really going to help your end users and use them accordingly. Field maps, they're very essential about how you go about letting the users know based on the temperature of the color, about letting them users know how those single measures really impact different locations that are there. If you have multiple measures, do not use those field maps in those situations. Now, the next one, probably one of the most important ones, I would say, is choosing the right visualizations. You can go about creating any visualization on top of any data that you may want to, but it's very essential that you present it in a format that it basically ends up becoming the best way to really consume that information. So when you go about choosing the right visualization, you need to keep in mind a few of the questions that you should ask yourself. Like, how does it really help the end user? Does it really help the end user to get to the information faster? It becomes easy for them to read. You improve the readability of it. You kind of take care of the scrolls. You do not have too many scrolls, just taking away the overall impact of what you're trying to build, and so on. Again, the next one, is it the way to really represent your data? Do you think that probably a different chart would really end up giving some more better information to the end user? Let's say if you have an overtime analysis, maybe a line chart would be better in those situations so that it becomes easy for the users to really identify those outliers rather than just showing that information, let's say in a column chart and so on. Next, is it right for my audience? Now, again, when you go about building these dashboards for your end users, you create them for a plethora of different groups that are out there. You may be creating something for your stakeholders, something for your marketing team, something for your sales ops, and so on. So it's really important that you understand, is it right for your audience that you're really creating those visualizations for? That it really ends up making sense for them. For some users who are really tech savvy, you go about creating some visualizations which are really fancy, good looking for your demonstration. They can really work out well. But when you go about really creating those visualizations which are easy to consume for your end users who are not really tech savvy, is where you go about make sure that you choose those visualizations which are right for your end users eventually. Next, you really need to understand when you go about creating those visualizations, is the data correct and meaningful? Does it really make sense? Eventually, when the data comes out and gets rendered on that visualization, does it show up right? Is it meaningful at the end of the day? Does it really share those insights that you would eventually want to want to share with your end users? These are few questions that you may always want to ask yourself. Next, best practices. Now, this is where we go about how would you go about creation of a dashboard, what is a dashboard, and how does it really help you, and so on. Do remember, basically, dashboards are a way for you to really prepare that information where you go about when you create multiple sheets eventually in a Tableau report, you can pull all of that information together by dragging all those different sheets together, different views, and creating a dashboard which would allow users to not only just look at the dashboard but also interact with it when you go about adding actions to your dashboards. It when you go about creating your dashboards, you really need to understand a few things like who your audience is, use the sweet spot, make sure you limit your colors and your views, you format your tooltips. Do remember that one dashboard does not tell it all. So you need to make sure that if you have to go about designing multiple dashboards, you go ahead and do that. Apart from that, you go about creating a story eventually for the end users by creating those different dashboards that you have. This is very important that you provide the required interaction to your end user. It's if the users cannot interact with your dashboard, it's not something that's really going to help them. So how you bring all of that information together, provide those required interaction points, create those tooltips really comes in very handy.
We are going to have a question answer session, but before we get to that, we're going to take a moment. We're going to hear from Mary. She is our product manager. She's going to introduce some promotions and webinar related courses. Mary, are you with us?
Yes, I am. I just want to bring you to our website so you can see what's next for you, right? We had discussed about Tableau, and Tableau is one of our partners here at NetCom, wherein we offer authorized instructor-led classes. And the first thing that I would recommend to you is look into the desktop classes that we have available. So if you are a beginner, an analyst who wants to take advantage of the power of Tableau, we do have a fundamental class that's designed for beginners. This way, you can have better understanding on important concepts and techniques in Tableau, so you can do simple to complex visualization and learn how to combine them in interactive dashboards. I did hear Deepak discuss about that. Then, as you move forward, there is also a 2-day intermediate class wherein you can expand the skills that you learned from Desktop 1. Make yourself a Tableau power user, right? And lastly, under the desktop courses, there's the desktop 3, which is your advanced course, which is also 2 days, right? This time, you're gonna explore complex data visualization and dig deep into your data. You'll be learning advanced uses for calculations by applying them to real world scenarios. So, all of these classes in total, there's 6 days. And if you want to know more about it, just go to our Tableau page and sign up. There's also other classes for server as well as for visual analytics. And there's also other resources here if you want to find more about Tableau, or you can also reach out to our learning consultants. If in case you have a team, another route for you, you're working in a company and you do have a team who needs to learn Tableau. One way is that we can set up a private class for you, tailor the discussion based on what you need, or we also have NetCom Plus, which is a subscription. This covers about 100 plus ILT, including the Tableau desktop classes, and about 200 plus e-learning. So I'd like to invite you to come and check out this page. This may prove to be more cost effective for you, especially if you have a group, because this one is just about, if I'm not mistaken, $29.99, and if you have 10 or more, it's even $24.99. Other resources that I would encourage you to look into are our promotions page, wherein there's a lot of promotions from various programs that we have, or encourage you to go into our resources page, wherein you can have access to webinars, blogs, assessments, case studies, to our entire course catalog. In fact, with e-learning, there's even free e-learning. Say, for example, AWS cloud is very hot. It's a hot topic. There are free AWS e-learning that you can access, about close to 300 of them. They're very quick. Each e-learning can range upon, at least 5 minutes, go up to 30 minutes. But the goal that we want you to have is that learn something, something new in a day, right? By then you could have accumulated a lot of knowledge that you can use. With that, Leela, I'll pass it on to you. Thank you for the time that you've given me to share this with them.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we will go ahead and get right into our question answer session then. So we'll just jump right into our question answer session. We've got a few waiting for us. How do you create subscriptions, and is it an option of the end user?
You can go ahead and create these subscriptions using Tableau if required. These are subscriptions which eventually the creator could really create for you, just to make sure that you receive the information. So if you're really looking to have those subscriptions being delivered to you, you can reach out to the creator of the report.
Thank you. Our next question I'm seeing, what examples of data analysis and visuals can you provide?
Again, it's a very long discussion that we can really have around that. So there are a lot of if I could speak very specific to how you could go about leveraging Tableau based on the industry that you're really looking for, and whichever your client or your organization is really invested in, you could go about, and there's a plethora of information that's available. There's a lot of specific documentation around that that's available on the web that you can explore. I would really share that information back with the organization group, and then maybe we can share that information back across with you. But there's a lot of information, whether you're working for the life sciences industry, where you're working for manufacturing. There's a lot of information around that. That's and things that are pre-built for you that you can really leverage from. I hope that answers that question.
Yes, thank you. Let's see. Our next question is, can I share my Tableau workbook with outside users who do not have a Tableau license?
Yes, you can. And that's fortunately that yes, you can do that. So basically that's where you can leverage Tableau Public for that. Now, Tableau Public is basically a free platform that will allow you to explore, create, and publicly share data visualizations online. Uh, Tableau Public will help us basically develop the data skills easy and let you basically share any content that you would want to eventually with any user that's there available on the web. They don't really need to have any existence or even any resemblance with Tableau altogether. They don't really have to be in their database as well. They can access those public dashboards that eventually make it available for them.
Thank you. Let's see. Um, Looks like we've got about 2 questions left. How do I make my visuals load faster?
All right. even that is something that we can really keep talking about, but there are a few things that you can really keep into mind, right? Like to maximize the profitability of your fast load times and interaction. There are a few things that you can really take care of to kind of like group them together. The first key point here is how you simplify your data. This is where you decide that you only use the data that's really relevant for your analysis. You do not include unnecessary rows, columns, and make sure you use the filters directly at the data source level itself to make sure that you only bring in the right data that's required. You aggregate your data if required. You push back your uh, complex calculations back on the data source level as possible. You normalize your tables using relationships and so on. Next, you also want to limit the number of filters, because the more number of filters you apply, eventually those are the number of queries that will get triggered and would initially kind of like burn on your data source, and it would take your data source eventually more time to really bring that information back and make it available. So that's where you really need to make sure that you limit the number of filters that you apply. If you do not need that information, do not apply them. If you need to use basically include filters if possible. Exclude filters would load the entire domain of a dimension, while your include filters will not. So you need to be very cautious of that. Next, you also want to maybe minimize the number of data points that you really have. So similar to like data aggregation, you can mark whatever marks you have in your visualization, you can group them together. So that's where grouping really comes into picture, where you do want to make sure that there are too much data that's out there, and eventually takes a lot of time for your visualization to get rendered. You want to make sure that you clean up your workbooks, you delete your unused sheets, your stories and dashboards and so on. Apart from that, all in all, basically, you can break it down into three different things. First is where your data source level. Make sure that you bring in what's required, make sure you build your right relationships, right calculations, use the right filters and so on. And finally, when you build your visualizations, make sure that you only provide what is really required to be rendered and remove anything that's really unnecessary and not really required.
Thank
That's it
you
for
so
me.
much. Looks like we've got one final question left before we do wrap up. Um, does Tableau support common or natural language understanding?
Yes, it does. And that's where one of the key benefits of using Tableau really comes into picture. Ask data is one of the key features, which is Tableau's natural language capability that allows you to build, basically work on top of any of your published data sources, whether they're on Tableau online or Tableau server. You can go about asking some natural language query questions, and it goes about bringing you back that information in form of visualization. But in order to reap the best benefits of Ask data, your data sources need to be curated to support an optimal analytic conversation. So that's where it's really important that, and there's enough documentation out there that's made available as well. So if you're really interested in knowing about Ask data a little bit more, there is information out there that you can really leverage from.
Wonderful. Thank you, Deepak.
Thank you, Leila. Thank you, everyone.
In addition to today's course, we have a lot of informative webinars that are coming up. So please go to www.netcomlearning.com/webinars/ to register. And we want to thank you all for joining us today. If you do come up with any additional questions, please feel free to send them to us at webinar@netcomlearning.com at any time. And we hope you all found today's webinar to be very informative. And we look forward to seeing you back here with us very soon. Feel free to tell your friends and colleagues about our webinars and other courses. We want to thank you all once again for joining us.